With the third Avengers movie, Infinity War, now in theaters, I've been spending a lot of time mulling over the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. For the past decade, Marvel Studios, along with a few other partner studios for licensing reasons, has released 18 films following the stories of dozens of special individuals in their quest to save or conquer the world. But in getting amped up for the most expansive crossover in cinematic history, I noticed that a handful of my friends, including some who were part of this very channel, were interested in the new movie, but didn't really know a lot of the pieces coming together for it. So I thought, hey, maybe there's something I can do to help give people the relevant background so they can understand what's at stake in this massive 160-minute Goliath of a superhero flick. And the best way to do that is to give a little insight into the MacGuffins everybody's going to be after this time around. So here we are. This is a brief history of the Infinity Stones. Now, while this video is meant to detail the Infinity Stones in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's important to understand their history in Marvel Comics overall. One of these 6 stones first appeared in the 1972-1973 run The Power of Warlock, where a soul gem was embedded in the forehead of Adam Warlock, as given to him by a being known as the High Evolutionary. In 1977, the 6 stones appear together for the first time in an event known as the Thanos War, where the Mad Titan Thanos attempted to use the power of these 6 stones to power a weapon that would destroy every star in the universe. In 1987, the Silver Surfer refers to them as Soul Gems for the first time, as they are used in an attempt to defeat Galactus by the Elders of the Universe and supplant him themselves as the oldest beings in existence. But the early 90s is what saw the bulk of the Infinity Stones as we know them today coming to fruition. During the Thanos quest in 1990, Thanos refers to the 6 as the Infinity Gems for the first time, and states that they are all that remains of a lonely god who existed before time itself. Thanos aims to collect the 6 and place them in a large left-handed golden glove he calls the Infinity Gauntlet in order to woo Death as her equal. She does not reciprocate. Following this in 1991 was the event The Infinity Gauntlet, in which Thanos uses his full control over the universe to kill half the living things in it in a single moment. Adam Warlock leads the powers of Earth to defeat Thanos, and in the end, Warlock uses the gauntlet to reverse the actions of Thanos. This spawned 2 sequels, first 1992's The Infinity War, in which Warlock struggles to deal with the powers of the gauntlet and expels the good and evil from himself in order to become a completely logical being. The evil in him reforms into his old enemy the Magus, who creates an army of evil superhero doppelgangers and tries to consume the planet, but in the end, Thanos reveals that he is in fact the guardian of the reality gem, with the one in Magus's gauntlet being a fake. In 1993, we got the Infinity Crusade, in which the good that Warlock expelled becomes a creature known as the Goddess, who takes the gems and creates a cosmic egg, within which she creates Paradise Omega, a utopia where she captures and brainwashes the good and mystic heroes of Earth. Deciding that evil will always exist where sentient life does, she attempts to rewrite the universe with no sentient life in it at all, but discovers that it was an illusion created by Adam Warlock to reveal to her brainwashed masses that she intended to destroy everything. The cosmic egg was destroyed, and the Infinity Gems were scattered once again. Now, this is all well and good, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like any other universe within the pantheon of Marvel stories, takes several liberties with the source material and changed up a considerable amount of the origins of each of the 6 Infinity Stones. We're going to walk through the known history of each of them and see how they all arrive at the forefront of Infinity War's battle between Thanos and his Black Order, and Tony Stark and Steve Rogers and the Avengers. From this point forward, we're going to be discussing several of the MCU films and getting into spoiler territory pretty badly, but then again, if you're watching this, either you've seen them already and want a refresher, or you haven't and you don't care much about spoilers, so you can just go watch Infinity War now. Either way, let's begin. The first movie where we even get a hint of information about the Infinity Stones comes in 2010's Iron Man 2. Nothing terribly definitive here, but when Tony Stark is looking through his late father's research, he finds an old newspaper from 1966 headlining the defection of Howard's eventual research partner Anton Vanko from the Soviet Union to the United States, and the last notes Tony finds in one notebook open with physics equations that include elements of field theory dealing with gravity, electromagnetism, before abruptly drifting into the topic of hypercubes, an extension of the square and cube into higher dimensional orders. A 4-dimensional hypercube, as drawn in his notebook, is also called a Tesseract. We'll come back to this in just a bit. Similarly, the next movie up, 2011's Thor, doesn't deal heavily with the Infinity Stones yet, but does help inform some details for later on. Something to hold on to for now is that in 965 AD, the frost giants of Jotunheim arrived near the village of Tonsberg, Norway, to begin their conquest of Earth, known to them as Midgard. Odin and the armies of Asgard arrived to drive them away, one of the many times his people have arrived on Earth, which had inspired what would become Norse mythology. Like I said, this is gonna come back. At the end of the movie, however, we get our first glimpse of an Infinity Stones containment, as S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury asks for Dr. Eric Selvig's assistance in studying a glowing blue cube that would come to be known as the Tesseract. Partly under the control of the trickster Loki, adopted frost giant son of Odin, Dr. Selvig agrees to experiment on it. Following that, we arrive at Captain America: The First Avenger, also released in 2011. Serving as both the origin story of Steve Rogers and the precursor to the looming Avengers crossover film, this movie was the first to directly involve an Infinity Stone in its plot and begin to fill in some of the blanks as to where they all began. The film opens once again in the village of Tonsberg, this time in March of 1942 at the height of the Axis powers' power. Remember how we mentioned the fight between Asgard and Jotunheim and Thor? Well, either around that time or during the battle itself, the Tesseract was lost and rediscovered by the locals, or was gifted to them directly by Odin. Either way, it was stored in a hidden vault inside an enormous wall carving of the world tree Yggdrasil. Enter Johann Schmidt, known to both friend and foe as Red Skull. He is just as keen on the occult as his Führer, and is quickly able to identify a fake cube, discovering the real one shortly after. According to Schmidt, the Tesseract was the jewel of Odin's treasure room, and shortly after claiming the artifact, Schmidt and Hydra, his personal military force, stopped supplying Nazi Germany with weapons, instead focusing on the Tesseract for themselves. In June of 1943, as Nazi Germany begins to lose its footing, Hydra continues working on its Tesseract-inspired weaponry, coming to a head near the end of the month when Schmidt uses an energy turret to vaporize 3 Nazi officials, breaking away from the Axis powers to attempt world domination on his own. Something to note here is how similar the sound effect of this cannon charging and firing is to another familiar sound in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
You will be brought before the Führer himself!
Either forced to join their militia.
Interesting, right? Well, this is all going to come together pretty soon. Further into the war, after Captain America, Steve Rogers, successfully raids a Hydra base with his unit, the Howling Commandos, and captures some of their tech, Howard Stark runs tests on its power source, noting it as being both alpha and beta ray neutral, and also highly volatile.
Write that down.
Finally, near or at the end of the war, presumably in early 1945, during an assault on the sole surviving Hydra base, Schmidt attempts to escape in his plane, the Valkyrie, another nod to his appreciation for Norse and Asgardian mythology, but is followed by Captain Rogers once more. As the fight comes to a head, Captain Rogers knocks Schmidt into the storage unit holding the Tesseract, causing it to malfunction and overload. An enraged Schmidt picks it up with his own hand and has his body torn apart as it creates a wormhole into open space and shreds him as it launches his body away. After Schmidt is gone, the Tesseract, still exuding massive energy, hits the floor of the Valkyrie and burns through it, eventually falling out of the plane altogether and into the North Atlantic Ocean. Steve Rogers crashes the Valkyrie into the Arctic, where he remained frozen until the 21st century. Shortly after, Howard Stark was able to recover the Tesseract, but was never able to find Rogers despite constant searches for his body. For the remainder of his life, Howard would study the Tesseract while it remained in the custody of the Strategic Scientific Reserve, and as it became the Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement and Logistics Division, or simply SHIELD, he would use it as the basis for his research into unlimited clean energy, ultimately resulting in working together with Anton Vanko in the late 60s into the 70s to create the arc reactor, which his son Tony would eventually miniaturize
In a cave! With a box of scraps!
and use as a power source for his line of Iron Man suits. See what I mean, though? Both sets of Tesseract-inspired tech having the same sound effects. Clever move, guys. And then we arrive at 2012's The Avengers. Not only is this the first major crossover in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and as far as I can tell, the first ever full crossover of 4 disconnected works under a single umbrella, but it also deals with the culmination of everything Tesseract-related thus far, in addition to slyly sneaking in a second Infinity Stone under our noses in the form of Loki's scepter. At the start of the movie, a shadowy figure called the Other gives Loki Laufeyson, freshly rescued from the emptiness of space, a glowing scepter. Shortly after, the Tesseract begins to act strangely in its containment vessel at the SHIELD headquarters of the Joint Dark Energy Mission, generating a huge spike in energy that is measured by Dr. Selvig for 4 hours before, boom, baby, in comes Loki, scepter in hand. The scepter appears to be capable of quite a lot right out of the gate, both firing immensely powerful projectiles as well as controlling the minds of anyone whose heart the scepter touches. Well, almost anyone.
This usually works.
Well, performance issues, it's not uncommon. 1 out of 5.
Having taken over the minds of several SHIELD agents, along with Clint Barton and Dr. Selvig, Loki escapes with the Tesseract, leaving SHIELD to assemble Earth's mightiest heroes to try and reclaim it. As Captain Rogers and Dr. Bruce Banner are brought on board the helicarrier, Loki in his underground research lab projects himself back to the sanctuary, where he and the Other have a little tiff over their plan to use the Tesseract to open a door for a Chitauri invasion. Dr. Selvig needs iridium to stabilize the wormhole they plan to create, so Loki and Barton head to Stuttgart, Germany, steal Heinrich Schaefer's eyeball, and make off with it, with Loki and the scepter ultimately being captured by the combined efforts of Rogers and Stark. Aboard the helicarrier, the two of them independently investigate the weirdness of what's going on with SHIELD and discover that they've been researching the Tesseract in order to create a new breed of energy weapons just like Hydra did 70 years prior. In fact, exactly like Hydra did 7 years prior. Meanwhile, the Scepter seems to be altering the minds and moods of those nearby, causing the Avengers to nitpick and antagonize each other, with Dr. Banner nearly hulking out and using it to destroy them all right then and there. After killing Agent Coulson, sending Thor back to Earth, and causing the Hulk to go berserk and launch himself off to some beat-up old air hangar, Loki reclaims the Scepter and heads down to Stark Tower, where he has Dr. Selvig activate the wormhole generator. The power of the Tesseract is so intense that it's able to generate an impenetrable force field around itself. However, Dr. Selvig had just enough control of his mind to build in a kill switch, such that if the Scepter is used, it can actually phase through the Tesseract's force field and cut the power to the wormhole generator. Selvig chalks this up to the Scepter also having immense energy readings, but his specific turn of phrase,
"The Tesseract can't fight. You can't protect against yourself,"
might clue in eagle-eyed viewers to the fact that the Scepter contains an Infinity Stone just like the Tesseract. Agent Natasha Romanoff uses the Scepter to shut down the generator, and the wormhole is closed. In the aftermath of the fight, S.H.I.E.L.D. holds on to the Scepter, while Thor escorts Loki back to Asgard with the Tesseract in tow. With Loki's mission a failure, the other suggests that Earth is now capable of defending itself, and that
to challenge them is to court death.
Which ends with the grin of the Mad Titan Thanos. So after the Avengers blew us all away, the following year we get the oh-so-kiss-kiss-bang-bangy Iron Man 3.
Trust me, you're gonna be in a puddle of blood on the ground in 5, 4, 3, come on! 2!
How did we get this shift?
All right, I'm gonna give you a chance to escape. Put down your weapons, tie yourselves to those chairs. I'll let you live. In 5, 4, bang!
Wow, that was...
You should be gone by now. You should already have been gone.
I am just beyond terrified.
Here it comes. 3, 4...
Shut up.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And this. Thor, The Dark World. Widely considered by many, myself included, to be the weakest of all 18 MCU films thus far, but I digress. Here we go. Before the existence of the very universe, there was a race known as the Dark Elves. Preferring the void to what was considered the blinding light of the cosmos after creation, around 5,000 years in the past, they, led by the evil Malekith, opted to use a superweapon to destroy the universe when the 9 realms aligned, powered by a substance known as the Aether. As they attempted to use the weapon, the armies of Asgard descended on Harudin, known to them as Svartalfheim, stealing the Aether and defeating the Dark Elves, with Malekith and the race's remnants escaping in a hibernation ship. King Bor, father of Odin, states that the Aether's power is too great to be destroyed and has it hidden deep within the realm so no one would ever find it. Meanwhile, shortly after the Chitauri invasion, Dr. Jane Foster is brought to a live-action ripoff of Beyond from the Animatrix. An old beat-up building where the physics don't make sense. Seriously though, it's just the Animatrix. Dr. Foster gets pulled through a portal and ends up face-to-face with the Aether, which gets all up in her and awakens the Dark Elves, prompting their return to reclaim it. Oh, and it also makes Jane explosive to the touch. And then Thor takes her to Asgard, where she does it again. After an assault on Asgard by Malekith's right-hand man Algrim and several other Dark Elves, Thor breaks Loki out of the dungeon in order to get them and Jane to Svartalfheim to draw the Dark Elves out. Which works. A little too well. And Malekith is able to reclaim the Aether by pulling it out of her, despite a direct attack from Thor, which appears to do no real damage to it at all. Interestingly enough, though, despite the Aether's normal presence as a liquid, after the blast we do see it as a collection of crystal-like fragments. In Greenwich, Malekith is able to use the Aether to fight against Thor, but thanks to the interference of the wormholes through the 9 realms, Thor is able to face the red storm brought about by it and defeat him, crushing him to death under his own ship. Asgard soon reclaims the Aether and decides in the movie's stinger that having 2 Infinity Stones so close together is dangerous, passing it off to Tanalir Tavan, also known as the Collector, for safekeeping, not knowing that he intends to collect them all himself.
1 down. 5 to go.
The following year, we got Guardians of the Galaxy, the first new entry in the series since Captain America: The First Avenger. During the opening credits, we see Peter Quill walking through the ruins of MYRIAD, where he finds a temple to the cosmic entities of death, entropy, infinity, and eternity, where a single metallic orb is held in suspension behind an energy field. He successfully extracts it, but not before Korath the Pursuer arrives to claim it for himself. Peter manages to escape, but argues with his old mentor and abductor, Yondu Udonta, about who gets to bring the orb in. Peter tries to bring it to the broker on Xandar as originally intended, but when he hears that Korath was working for the Kree zealot and war criminal Ronan the Accuser, he calls off the deal. Peter then encounters Gamora, who is sent by Ronan to obtain the orb, and they fight, as do Rocket and Groot, who are there to capture Peter and earn the bounty on his head set by Yondu. They're eventually arrested by Nova Prime and imprisoned in the Kiln, an interspatial supermax, where the orb is kept along with Peter's possessions. There, they start a tense companionship with Drax the Destroyer, and the five of them break out and head to Gamora's secret contact, who she was planning to sell the orb to instead of bringing it back to Ronan, who, by the way, is working for Thanos, as Loki did during the Avengers. That contact turns out to be the Collector, who opens the orb and tells the five of them, and us the audience, about the Infinity Stones. Before the creation of the universe, there were 6 singularities that were eventually crafted into stones. Whether Malekith was the one who personally crafted the Reality Stone, known as the Aether, is unclear. Many have used its power in the past, including Isan the Searcher, who lays waste effortlessly to an entire planet, and a group of 8, 9 ancients who were torn apart by its immense energy despite sharing it among each other. When the Collector's slave Karina tries to use the Bare Power Stone to free herself, it destroys the Collector's museum, which still houses the Aether, by the way, and obliterates her body. Gamora grabs the orb and insists that they get it to Nova Prime immediately, but are interrupted by the arrival of both Ronan, who was called by Drax to challenge him directly, and Yondu, who has been tailing the team this whole time. Gamora's adoptive sister Nebula, working for Ronan, chases Gamora down and blows up her ship, stealing the orb and leaving her to die. Ronan decides to use the orb for himself, breaking it open and embedding the Power Stone in his massive warhammer, the Cosmirod, and defects from Thanos, declaring that once he is done destroying Xandar, he will destroy Thanos as well. Peter and his team, along with Yondu's Ravagers, warn Nova Prime of what's coming, and the combined efforts of all of them is still not enough to prevent Ronan from landing on the Xandarian surface. All he has to do is strike the ground in order to destroy the planet, but he winds up being distracted by...
Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier. Ooh, child, things will get brighter.
Long enough for Rocket and Drax to blow up the Cosmirod, releasing the Power Stone, which Peter grabs hold of. As his body starts to decay and disintegrate, Gamora grabs hold of him to share the load, as does Drax and Rocket as well. The four of them are able to contain the power, declaring themselves the Guardians of the Galaxy, and obliterate Ronan. They pass the Power Stone and a shiny new orb off to Nova Prime, and head off to take on more adventures. Back on Earth, we see what's transpired over the past few years in 2015's Avengers Age of Ultron. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been torn apart during the events of Captain America the Winter Soldier, when it turns out that it had been infiltrated by Hydra since the very beginning, meaning the Hydra-like weapons in the Avengers were basically, well, Hydra weapons. Anyway, after the events of the Avengers, S.H.I.E.L.D. had held onto Loki's scepter, which, thanks to a little obstructive bureaucracy, ended up in the hands of Hydra directly, under the new leadership of Baron von Strucker. They used the power then to try mutating... enhancing several individuals, with the only successes being Pietro and Wanda Maximoff, 2 twins orphaned by a war in Sokovia that resulted in a Stark Industries dud missile, leaving them sitting in terror for 2 days after their parents were killed. After Wanda uses her abilities to show Tony Stark his worst fear, a far larger invasion that the Avengers cannot stop and die trying to protect, he reclaims the scepter for the Avengers. Back at Avengers Tower in New York, he has Jarvis analyze the scepter and realizes that it houses something inside it that seems to contain code. Upon further analysis, Tony and Dr. Banner come to the conclusion that what's contained within the scepter seems to be a fully realized artificial intelligence. While they leave Jarvis to run tests on the code, it awakens and destroys Jarvis, calling itself Ultron, taking over one of Tony's Iron Legion drones and escaping back to Sokovia with the scepter to build stronger and stronger bodies for itself. During a battle in South Africa, Wanda gives Thor a dark vision of the future as well, not just seeing his body exploding with electricity during Ragnarok, but also a growing collection of strange gems. Ultron used the scepter to control the mind of Dr. Helen Cho to force her to use vibranium to build him a new body. He cracks open the casing, exposing the Mind Stone, and embeds it in the forehead of his new creation. Thor enters the Water of Sights to complete the vision given to him by Wanda, and sees the Infinity Stones coming together at the knuckles of a golden glove. After the Avengers capture the cradle containing the next incomplete body of Ultron, Thor arrives to overload its power source and give birth to Vision, who holds the Mind Stone still in his forehead. It, combined with his living vibranium body, give him immense powers, including levitation in flight, laser blasts, dematerialization at will. He's got it all. In the end, the Avengers take down Ultron and decide to move to a new compound away from the city where Vision resides for years. In the stinger of the movie, we see Thanos take a left-handed Infinity Gauntlet, declaring,
I'll do it myself.
Last but not least, we have Doctor Strange, released in 2016. This film, like most of the others focusing on Infinity Stones that aren't the Tesseract, presents a pretty linear progression of events, this time for a relic known as the Eye of Agamotto. Early in the movie, a novice Doctor Stephen Strange is studying the mystic arts in Camartage and decides to try using the Eye of Agamotto in order to fulfill spells involving time manipulation. With his eidetic memory, Doctor Strange is quickly able to learn how to use it to move time forward and backward in a localized space. Master Wong and Master Mordo tell him about the threat of the Dark Dimension and explain that the Eye of Agamotto was a relic built by Agamotto, the first Sorcerer Supreme, thousands of years in the past. The Eye of Agamotto itself plays very little of a role again until the very end of the movie, where Doctor Strange uses it to reverse time in Hong Kong to try and prevent the mass destruction caused by the collapse of the local sanctum, and is used again in the ultimate climax in order to trap Dormammu, ruler of the Dark Dimension, in a time loop, forcing him to relive the same encounter with Doctor Strange over and over and over again until he finally gives up and allows him to leave, vowing never to return to Earth. At the end of it all, Master Wong reveals that the Eye of Agamotto is in fact an Infinity Stone and should be kept in Camartage for safekeeping. I lied, there's one last bit. In Thor Ragnarok, as Loki goes to place the crown of Surtur on the Eternal Flame, we get a quick glimpse of the Tesseract in Odin's weapons vault, where it's implied strongly that he takes it with him before Asgard is ultimately destroyed. And that brings us to now, at the dawn of the Infinity War. So now that we've gone through each of these movies one by one, let's wrap this up with a quick chronological account of the 5 Infinity Stones we've seen thus far, what's happened to them, and where they are now. Here we go. Before the creation of the universe, 6 singularities are converted into the Infinity Stones. Either then or much later, Malekith turns the Reality Stone into its native liquid form called the Aether. Sometime after this, Aeson the Searcher uses the Power Stone to destroy a planet, and a group of ancients are unable to control its power when they try to use it together. Eventually, it ends up on MYRIAD and is revered in a temple to the cosmic entities. 5,000 years in the past, Malekith and the Dark Elves attempt to use the Aether to destroy the 9 realms as they align during the convergence, but King Bor of Asgard prevents this and captures the Aether himself, hiding it deep within the realms where no one can find it. Sometime after this, through unknown means, King Odin comes into possession of the Tesseract, which he keeps as the jewel of his treasure room for centuries. At the dawn of the Common Era, Agamotto, the first Sorcerer Supreme, imbues a special relic with the power of the Time Stone, referred to henceforth as the Eye of Agamotto. In 965 AD, Odin battles against the Frost Giants in Tonsberg, Norway, likely utilizing the Tesseract to do so. A Viking church either finds or is given the Tesseract, which it hides in a wall mural of Yggdrasil. 1,000 years later, in March of 1942, Johann Schmidt attacks that Tonsberg church and claims the Tesseract for Hydra. In June 1943, Hydra successfully develops its first weapon using the Tesseract and continues to do so over the course of World War II. These weapons fire blue bolts of energy when used, but Captain Steve Rogers and the Howling Commandos lead Allied efforts to knock down Hydra bases one after the other. In early 1945, at the final Hydra stronghold, Johann Schmidt tries to escape with the Tesseract aboard the Valkyrie. Captain Rogers follows him and knocks the Tesseract loose, which Schmidt picks up with his bare hands, ripping his body through a wormhole, presumably killing him. The Tesseract falls to the floor of the Valkyrie into the ocean, where it is soon recovered by Howard Stark, leading him to study it for the remainder of his life. In 1966, Anton Vanko defects from the Soviet Union, and at the end of the 60s into the 70s, he, along with Howard Stark, developed the arc reactor based on their research into the Tesseract. In 1973, Howard Stark records a message for his son with a coded message that the layout of the Stark Expo is in fact the new element he was attempting to synthesize that would mimic the Tesseract's power. In 2010, while captured by the 10 Rings, Tony Stark miniaturizes his father's arc reactor design from memory
In a cave with a box of scraps!
ultimately using these designs to fuel his Iron Man suits. In 2011, Tony Stark successfully synthesizes a new element to replace the palladium core in his miniature arc reactor, which closely matches the energy signature of the Tesseract. After doing this, he reopens his father's research into using the arc reactors for clean energy. In 2011-2012, director Nick Fury invites Dr. Eric Selvig to S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters to study the Tesseract, and he agrees under the influence of Loki. In 2012, Thanos has the Other give Loki Laufey's son a scepter, which he uses to activate the Tesseract, teleporting him to Earth. He uses the scepter to control people's minds and captures the Tesseract in order to open a wormhole to Chitauri space, but the combined efforts of the Avengers is able to close the wormhole, using the equal power of the scepter to deactivate the Tesseract-powered machine. The scepter remains on Earth under S.H.I.E.L.D. supervision, while the Tesseract returns to Asgard with Thor and Loki. In 2013, as a new convergence begins, Dr. Jane Foster discovers the Aether by accident, carrying it with her and awakening the Dark Elves that kept themselves in stasis for 5,000 years. Malekith reclaims the Aether and again tries to use it to destroy the 9 realms, but is stopped by Thor. Volstagg and Lady Sif bring the Aether to the Collector, who wants to collect the 6 Infinity Stones for his museum, and begins seeking out the rest. In 2014, Hydra reveals that they have infected S.H.I.E.L.D. from the beginning and capture much of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s resources and hardware, including the Scepter. Using its power, they enhance twins Pietro and Wanda Maximoff, giving them superhuman abilities. Also in 2014, Peter Quill captures the orb on MYRIAD, and after failing to sell it to a broker on Xandar, eventually brings it to the Collector on Nowhere, where it is soon Stone captured by Nebula and given to Ronan the Accuser aboard the Dark Aster. He attempts to use the raw Power Stone to destroy Xandar, but is stopped by the Guardians of the Galaxy, who entrust it to Nova Prime for safekeeping. In 2015, the Avengers reclaim the Scepter, with Tony Stark attempting to use it to complete his Ultron AI to control his Iron Legion and protect the world. Instead, the Mind Stone held within takes over by itself, and Ultron uses the Scepter to control Dr. Helen Cho's mind and places the Mind Stone into his intended final body. This body is stolen by the Avengers and activated, giving birth to Vision, who helps defeat Ultron and allies himself with the Avengers from then forward. Seeing this play out, Thanos takes the Infinity Gauntlet and decides to collect the Infinity Stones himself. In 2017, Dr. Stephen Strange begins using the Eye of Agamotto for basic time control spells and keeps the relic on his person while dealing with the threat of Caecilius. He eventually uses it to reverse the massive amount of destruction in Hong Kong and locks Dormammu in the Dark Dimension in a time loop until he decides to let the Earth go, after which Doctor Strange returns it to the heart of Kamar-Taj. Also in 2017, Loki takes the Tesseract from the weapons vault before Asgard is destroyed, taking it aboard the escape vessel with him. And so, that's where we stand. The Tesseract on King Thor's ship, the Mind Stone embedded in Vision's head, the Aether presumably still in the wreckage of the Collector's Museum, the Orb still in the care of Nova Prime, and the Eye of Agamotto hidden in the remote Kamar-Taj. But what about the sixth Infinity Stone, the Soul Stone? As far as we know, we have yet to see it in any of the 18 movies thus far, but there have been a wide array of theories, ranging from Adam Warlock's cocoon at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, to within Heimdall, whose eyes glow with the same amber color the Soul Stone is expected to it just not showing up yet. Honestly, I would love it if it had something to do with the vibranium meteor that crashed down on Wakanda, which itself was almost certainly a result of the same dying star that Mjolnir was forged from. Odds are the answer will be discovered in Avengers Infinity War, and I cannot wait to check it out for myself. I hope this helped catch everyone up in time for the movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, please feel free to share your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching.
I hope they remember you.
Holy cow. Hey guys, welcome to the end credits, I guess. There's not really a lot of these, but I'll probably be showing our Patreon supporters over on the side. If you're interested in helping us make more videos like these, feel free to check us out at patreon.com/dpadfm. If you like what we see here, please feel free to leave a like or comment, subscribe. We're looking forward to doing a lot more kind of video essays like these in the future. This wasn't really the video I was intending to make in the lead up to Infinity War, but I think I'm going to hold on to my original idea, and we might be seeing that sometime in the future. So that's something to look forward to there. I love the Marvel movies. I'm pretty unrepentant about that, so I'm really looking forward to this. And thankfully, I think I've only seen one very minor, well, maybe not minor, spoiler so far. I don't know. We'll see what happens there. But it's not anywhere in this video, so don't worry about that. There are no Infinity War spoilers as far as I'm aware. Yeah, hope everybody goes and enjoys the movie. It's going to be good. It's going to be long. I'm going to have to make sure to pee before I go. Yeah, bye.